So I remember just going, Celeste, and I just ran out of bed. I still don't get it. So I'm saying, what? She was asleep in her bed, in our home. And he did this under my watch. That's something I have to live with. Breathe, sweetie, please don't leave me. Don't leave me.
I'll never forget the phone call.
Outside, security footage shows Seiko fleeing in his car.
And I'm just screaming her name down the hallway. I go, Celeste, sweetie, what happened? And I'm pulling her out of the bed. She's not helping me at all. This is a crime scene. We found a knife.
Hello everybody and welcome back. First thing, I got Invisalign, so my speech is going to be a little different for the time being, but hopefully it's not too noticeable and you'll get used to it because, see, when there's a load of S's in a row, it's game over for me. But we're going to persevere. This week, as always, I'm bringing you another true crime story. I need to stop talking with my hands, that was way too... I'm bringing you another true crime story this week, and this one, they're all scary to me and probably everybody, but this one just makes me makes me feel weird, feels like chasing, you know when somebody's chasing you up the stairs and your tailbone feels weird? That's what this story makes me feel like. Before we jump in, if you haven't already, do you know what I'm gonna say? Subscribe. You know where the button is. And also hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. This is going to be a story about the chilling murder of Celeste Mano. Who is Celeste Mano? Celeste was a 23-year-old girl who was just working a normal job, you know, your normal 9 to 5. She was living the life of most 23-year-old girls, except for one major thing. She was being stalked. It's June 2019, and a man called Loay Seiko, who was a fellow colleague of Celeste, but only for a brief moment in time, because he had just been fired, he'd just been sacked. And on this day, Celeste was asked to escort him out of the building. You know, that's just what they do, isn't it? When someone gets fired, they get followed out of the building to make sure, you know, they're leaving. And it's worth noting, this is the most amount of time that Celeste and Seiko had spent together. Like, her escorting him out of the building, that's the most contact they'd ever had. When she got home that night, she told her mother, Aggie DeMano, that she felt really bad for him because, you know, he'd just been fired. So when she was, you know, escorting him out, she extended her hand over to him to wish him all the best, but he decided to take it one step further. Well, I say one step, quite a few steps, and he actually went and kissed her on the cheek. And she said that she got really, embarrassed and red in the face. I mean, I feel like most of us would if it's a man that we just met 0.2 seconds ago and they're kissing us on the cheek. But then a few days go by and she gets a message on Instagram from none other than Seiko himself. And then another, and then another, and another. He became instantly obsessed with her, but she never reciprocated it, never gave him any sort of indication that she would be remotely interested, but that didn't stop him. For the most part, she ignored him, but she would respond on a few occasions just to ask him to stop messaging and saying that he was making her feel really uncomfortable, but that only made him worse. She tried to block him on Instagram, but every time she did, 20 minutes would go by and then a new Instagram account would pop up and start spamming her with more and more messages. When that didn't work, she figured that he would just grow tired of this and eventually leave her alone, but she was very wrong. He just kept going and going and going. Her mother got very worried, as any mother would, but she got very worried to the point where she was like, listen, he knows where you work. What if he finds out where you live? Now, after 6 months of this relentless stalking, Celeste and Aggie knew that they had to do something because this guy was not going away. So they went to the police. At first, Celeste didn't want to, but then her mother convinced her that it was the right thing to do, so they ended up going. But was it any help? No. The police told them, and I quote, "He hasn't committed a crime. There's nothing we can do about it." They also said, that's social media these days. If you don't like it, get off social media. What? I can't imagine that at this point, going through 6 months of all of that with this guy constantly messaging her, not leaving her alone, and then being told he's doing nothing wrong. Like, he has every right to do that. So clearly the police were no help, and another 6 months go by, and it just gets worse. It's no longer just messages at this point. He was now being seen parked outside of her work, and he would follow her around everywhere, which then led him to figuring out where she lived. But that's not to say that the messages had slowed down. No. They were now turning explicit. Like, they were vulgar. At this point, they had no idea what to do but turn back to the police. And they were a little hesitant because of all the help they were in the first place. But, like, where do they turn? But this time, they had some luck. They actually managed to get a police officer to listen to them. And they were asked, have you been to the police before? And Aggie replies, yes, actually, 6 months ago. Are you saying something should have been done about this then? And the officer replies, let's just say some of us do our job better than others. So you're telling me something could have in fact been done all the way back then, but that officer just didn't want to. That is so scary to think about. Like, the officer knew what that man was doing was not okay, but was just didn't want to do anything about it. The officer goes on to say that Celeste needs to get something called an intervention order. This was meant to prohibit him from contacting her in any way. They took Loay Seiko's name and served him with a personal safety intervention order. But this didn't make them feel any better, because Aggie didn't feel like this was going to do anything, telling Celeste that it's just a piece of paper, let's remember that. But it seems to work for a month. But then, out of nowhere, a 3-page letter gets sent to Celeste on Instagram, and it's Seiko. He's pleading with her to take away the order and stop ruining his life. He also said in the letter that if she dropped it, then they could both just move on with their lives. But now, he's breached the order. The police acted on this because it's a breach, and they charged Seiko, and Celeste and Aggie finally feel some sort of relief. Like, okay, the police have stepped in, and it like kind of stops everything for a bit because, you know, the police have stepped in. So now to Celeste and Aggie, they're like, he's scared. He's learned his lesson. They even said, we thought it was over, but it wasn't. His next move was bigger than anything he had done at this point. He bought a weapon. A man called Chris Ridsdale was very close to Celeste before she got murdered. They had just started dating, and he also worked at the same company as Celeste. And on the day that she was murdered, they took this photo. As you can see, they look really happy. Celeste couldn't wait to post this on her Instagram, and she couldn't wait for Chris to then make it his profile photo. Like, they loved this photo. But her posting that photo on her Instagram was the tipping point for a certain someone. When Seiko saw this photo, he flipped. So it's November 16th, 2020, and Celeste and Aggie are home alone. It's just before 4 a.m, so they're both in bed asleep when Seiko enters the house, holding a large hammer and a kitchen knife. He uses the hammer to smash through Celeste's bedroom window, and without hesitation, he attacks her in her bed. When talking about that night, Aggie said,
So I remember just going, Celeste, and I just ran out of bed and I'm just screaming her name down the hallway. I go, Celeste, sweetie, what happened? And I realise that I'm running all over glass, I'm seeing blood. I still don't get it, and I'm pulling her out of the bed. She's not helping me at all, but I see all that glass, and so I thought I didn't want to drop her on all that. Please, sweetie, please don't leave me, don't leave me.
Her mother was frantically trying to save her, but hadn't realised what had happened. Seiko had fled the scene. There's like surveillance footage showing him like driving very fast away from the scene. Once the paramedics arrived on the scene, they stopped Aggie and told her that they had just found a knife and that this was now a crime scene. Celeste was stabbed 23 times in the chest, and the one that killed her was the stab directly to her heart.
She was asleep in her bed in our home. And he did this under my watch. That's something I have to live with.
Now, this wasn't a last-minute decision for Seiko, and his next move proves this. First of all, as we know, he left the murder weapon at the scene, and now he's on his way to the police station to turn himself in. Might seem strange at first thought, but in the words of Aggie, mark my words, he's going to try and get off on mental impairment. Aggie wanted nothing more than to make sure he got what he deserved. Before all of this happened, Aggie didn't know anything about law in the justice system, but is now making it her mission to learn and gain knowledge of what's about to come. And the more she learned, the angrier she got. She was now realising just how flawed the justice system is. A psychologist, Professor Troy McEwen, specialises in the ins and outs of stalking behaviour, saying that the first step of understanding the problem is being upfront about it. Recognise what stalking is and use the word stalking. If you go to the police, say stalking. The government handled the death of Celeste Mano very poorly and tried to push it away. Now a new tool has come into play called SASH, which stands for Screening Assessment for Stalking and Harassment. It's a list of questions that police should ask victims when they go to the police about a stalker. And even though this tool has been introduced, not every police station uses it, which is really hard to understand. Like, why aren't they using it? Why aren't they asking the necessary questions? The case was in and out of court for about 3 years, and Seiko finally pleaded guilty to the murder of Celeste Mano. But this is only after he failed to convince psychiatrists that he was mentally impaired. And the more stuff that came out just proves that this wasn't a last-minute decision to kill Celeste Mano. For example, they found out that he bought the knife literally the day after the breach. Like, he didn't hesitate after he didn't get what he wanted. Like, whilst Celeste and Aggie thought that he was scared and had learned his lesson, he was actually going out and buying a knife, the murder weapon. Now it's time for the family to learn about Seiko's punishment. And in the courtroom, he didn't show any emotion before or after finding out what his punishment was. He was sentenced to at least 30 years behind bars, with the judge saying, Celeste deserved life, and you decided otherwise. Celeste's family wasn't happy with the outcome. They wanted him to get a life sentence, because in the words of Aggie, she had dreams. She doesn't get a second chance. So I'm supposed to be okay with him getting a second chance? The family were asked if they were going to keep fighting for justice, like to change the system. And Aggie responded, I promise Celeste that I will get her justice, one way or another. When it comes to Celeste, obviously this is 4 years later, but when she did die, she was cremated and her mother put her ashes in a little gold heart that she carries around with her all the time, which I thought was really sweet. don't know what part about it, but it just makes me feel so uneasy. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I know it's because, you know, stalking and how extreme it can get. But then also, I'm not going to say it, but they tried to get help early on. That's all I'm going to say. If you'd like to hear about more true crime stories from yours truly, subscribe. That's all you got to do. And hit the notification bell if you want to be alerted that I have uploaded on the old tube. I hope you're having a swell day, a swell evening, a swell night. Any time of day, I hope it's swell for you. I will be coming at you with another true crime story in the next video, so stay tuned for that, and I shall see you soon. Love you, bye.